Hey, welcome to Audio Mover AM. It is September 30th, 2025. And I found this great news article that totally caught my attention, and I think you're going to love this. It's The Who's Pete Townshend shares when and why he smashed his first guitar. But before we jump into that, let's talk about who had birthdays today. September 30th, Trey Anastasio of Phish. He was born in 1964. He turned 61 today. Robbie Takic. I'm not even sure how you say his last name for sure. He was born in 64. He's 61. He was the bassist and sometimes singer for the Goo Goo Dolls. I got to tell you something. I loved the Goo Goo Dolls. I don't know what it was. I heard them back when they first came out. I thought they were so amazing, kind of followed their career. And I just think they have such fantastic music. I loved them so much. I actually took my family to see them sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s. Anyway, they were just great. So anyway, Robbie Takic, 61 today. Gibby Haynes, singer for the Butthole Surfers, born in 57, 68 today. Brian Damage Forsyth. This one is near and dear to my heart because this guy's in Kix, and he was actually, I talk about them every once in a while. One of the greatest albums to come out of the 80s, as far as like 80s metal is concerned, is the album Midnight Dynamite from Kix. I think I made a video recently where I even talked about that. I love that album so much. Anyway, so this one's kind of near and dear to me because I thought Kix was just so great. And so he's 68. Matt Fallon, I didn't know anything about this one. Ex-Skid Row and Anthrax, born in 65. He's 60 years old. Bill Raflin from Ministry and KMFDM. Was born today. And then the legend Mark Bolan from T-Rex, born in 1947. Man, was that guy just kind of became such a legend. Mark Bolan. Okay, and then this last one, and I saw this and I thought, I just have to put this on the birthday list today. Marilyn McCoo. Okay, why would I say Marilyn McCoo? Because did you ever watch Solid Gold? And Solid Gold for years was hosted by Dionne Warwick. And as I remember this, she somehow stepped down or retired or something, and it was Marilyn McCoo that took over. I just kind of remember this because I think it was Sunday nights we would watch Solid Gold. And just kind of, it was one of those little ritual things. You'd see some popular bands on there and what have you. But I remember somehow Marilyn McCoo came in and she started replacing her or something like that. And we didn't really know who she was, but she was actually in the group, The Fifth Dimension, that did the song Age of Aquarius. And I didn't learn this till many years later, but I actually have that album. So anyway, it's just kind of a cool memory thing that Marilyn McCoo, who she was and that she was born on September 30th. Okay, back to this Townshend article. I think this is so cool. I thought this was so fascinating when I read this. And anyway, I think you'll enjoy this. Legendary musician and guitarist of The Who, Pete Townshend, still remembers when and why he smashed his first guitar. The Let My Love Open the Door songwriter would gain a reputation for destroying his equipment on stage, while he says the practice would embarrass him, especially when he'd be asked to perform the stage ritual. Okay, you're going to find, I found this so interesting. In an interview with Playboy magazine, Townshend said, "I was 13. John Entwistle and I were rehearsing together in the front room of my house. My grandmother came in shouting, turn that bloody racket down. I said, I'll do better than that. And I got my guitar. This was a good guitar that I'd paid for myself with money I earned from a paper route and smashed it to smithereens. I said, now will you, family friendly, get out of my life? And she stomped out. I looked at John and said, what now? And he said, another paper route, I think." First of all, what? Pete, I mean, that if that's true, you got to be kidding me. Grandma comes in and you destroy, whatever. That says something deeper down somehow, I think, about Pete Townshend. That's fascinating. Okay, but then once I had done it, it was always there as a possibility. If I ever wanted to deal with any kind of hidden rage, I could always take it out on the guitar. I could always trigger the same little bit of psychotherapy. Anyway, again, take it out on the guitar. It's just fascinating that okay, so now listen to this. Townsend's guitar smashing ways would come back to haunt him somewhat as he admitted regret over doing it so often in the early days of The Who. He told interviewer David Sheff, "Well, you have to remember, I'm not angry all the time. Even now, I occasionally get frustrated on stage with guitars and want to smash them. I tend not to do it, but the opportunity is always there. I smashed a guitar on the Psycho Derelict tour, and it was great fun. It's also embarrassing is what it is. It's like comedians being forced to use their catchphrase after they've become serious actors." Townsend was also confirmed he was sometimes asked to smash guitars rather than letting it be a natural part of the performance. Which is just so funny, natural. Okay, anyway, an appearance on the David Letterman talk show would be such a moment. Apparently, when he did it there, they asked him to do it, and he said that he'd do it if they gave the money to charity or something like that. Okay, but the underlying part there that was so interesting to me is that last part where he said it's embarrassing because people tend to expect it. The fact that it became a ritualistic thing. I never thought about this before until I read this, but consider Paul Stanley, for example. Every concert, at the end of the concert, what's going to happen? You're going to see him kind of go to the back of the stage, quietly take his good guitar off, put a not so good guitar on, come out to the front of the stage, and then break it. And you want to see it, but it's kind of this, it's just part of the show. And it was so interesting that Pete Townshend talks about this thing. It would be a different thing when you see somebody breaking a guitar because they're mad. Now, on that same story, talking about Kiss, I one time saw Gene Simmons. The memory's a little bit scattered, but I remember him starting a bass solo. This was in the non-makeup era. This is back in the 80s. And he came out to start doing his bass solo, and it sounded awful. There was something going wrong with it. And he stopped, and he kind of shook his hand, crossed his arms, and he looked back at his tech. He started playing again, and it didn't sound right. And I remember it was the weirdest thing. He took his bass off, and he just threw it. And I remember going, whoa. And now see that, it was because it was real. At least it felt real. He was mad. And there was something so cool about that it was this moment of actual rage where he's throwing his guitar with no concern if the thing breaks when it lands on the ground. Now, another area where you'll see this is Rob Halford. When he brings the Harley out on stage, during the song Hellbent for Leather. Now, if you go see Judas Priest in concert and Rob Halford does not bring the motorcycle out on stage, you probably ask for your money back because it is part of the show. But it doesn't have that amazing raw energy that Chris Christopherson did in A Star Was Born, where you see him wander off the stage. Some guy's got a motorcycle there, and he just gets on the thing and just drives it up onto the stage in just utter rock and roll chaos. And that's what I thought when I read this. It was like, it's interesting that we take these things that are supposed to represent the chaos of rock and roll, and then we shrink wrap it, ship it, just kind of the same rote thing that a band will do every single night. And it loses all of that, the energy that it was supposed to. Now, of course, they're not going to get up the energy to go grab a motorcycle and drive it on stage or whatever possesses you to do that every night. So you do just kind of want to see it. But it is an interesting thing where Pete Townshend's like, I did it originally out of rage. And when you start getting asked to do it, it is a little bit like a comedian, and not just a comedian that stops being a comedian. It's like you're a comedian that is just, for the rest of your life, you have to just say the same line over and over and over again that at one point meant something, and now it's just how you get your paycheck. And that's the difference here that I just listening to Pete Townshend talk about it that way, I thought was really, really fascinating. Anyway, I thought you might find that interesting too. Okay, now let's talk about comments. So yesterday there was a comment that this one jumped out at me, and this was a Black Sabbath video. I actually think that this Black Sabbath video was one we put out. I think we might even put this out yesterday. Anyway, I just thought this comment was really, there was something in here that kind of jumped out at me that I wanted to share with you. And this was, I think I was reading a newspaper article. They were talking to Ozzy and Tony Iommi, but it was during the period of Never Say Die, the tour, and the kind of the weird, the difficulties all around, the instability, the challenges that surrounded that. You know, of course, Ozzy at this point, you know, he'd kind of quit the band temporarily, and it was just kind of an awkward time when during that period, because of course Never Say Die was kind of looked at as this kind of half effort, wasn't really a great album. A lot of people didn't think, and then, you know, Van Halen's now opening up for them, and they're these new hot shots, and Black Sabbath is kind of on the way out, and Van Halen's on the way in. Just a fascinating period in the history of Black Sabbath. But he said something in here that I think is really interesting that you're going to enjoy. So this is from Tom Sabbath. Again, this is just a comment left down on a video that we made. I'm fascinated by this period in the band too. It's very hard to know with Sabbath. They seem to want to keep you guessing about a lot of things. I really like Never Say Die. You can hear the band is falling apart, but I just love their versatility, and I'd rather this than the same thing over and over again. And that's the part that really jumped out at me. Because one of the problems that a lot of rock bands run into is it's a little bit like what we were talking about before with the breaking of the guitar. The fans kind of come to expect the same thing over and over again. And it's a trap that a lot of bands fall into, because they put an album out, people love it, and so then they put out that album kind of a part 2 version. And people like it, but somehow having the clone or the same thing, it's easy to get bored, even though the fans say they want the same sound. If you give them too much of the same thing, then the fans kind of get bored, and then the band starts falling off a little bit. And there's a bunch of examples of this where bands have successfully figured out how to reinvent themselves. Probably one of the greatest examples is going to be the Black Album from Metallica, because a lot of people got turned off by that album. But in the process, you know, because they were kind of redefining their sound with that record. And a lot of people fell off, but they gained, for every person they lost, they gained thousands more, you know, and it's the thing that maybe kind of set them on that trajectory that landed them into this household name thing that they are today, where they're able to go fill up stadiums, which is incredible when you think about that with that band, you know, that back in the early 80s was kind of this, who, you know what, and this underground, obnoxious, loud speed, but they reinvented themselves. You know, and another great example of this is the band U2. They're constantly redefining who they were. And the fans kind of stuck with them because they were writing good songs, the music was good. And there's so many different groups that were able to do this, but most aren't. And so, but it was interesting here, because one of the things that we don't always think about with Black Sabbath is their versatility. Because they did, over the years, have a lot of really interesting things they did. And I'll give you one of my favorite examples of this, and it came off the album Paranoid. And it's the song Planet Caravan. Now, when I was a kid and I was listening to Paranoid, the album, I didn't like that at all. I thought that was kind of like, what am I listening to? But the older I got, I went back, I don't know what this was. It was probably 20, 25 years ago. I just busted out Paranoid and I was listening to it. And Planet Caravan came on and I thought, I love this. But it was not like what you would normally expect from Black Sabbath, having heard the entire first album and most of Paranoid. Then all of a sudden Planet Caravan pops up and you're like, no, these guys are cool. This is great. They have this ability to have this diversity and versatility and change their sound. And over the years, Black Sabbath did a lot of that. They were able to reinvent themselves. They were able to come up with different sounds and different ideas. And they actually did a pretty good job with that. So anyway, I like the fact that he just noted that. Look, maybe, you know, a lot of people don't think it was the greatest album, but I actually like having something just different. And I think I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know I can. And so that was just just kind of a cool insight there. This is, like you guys, I could talk about Sabbath and Ozzy all day. To me, they are the perfect hard rock band, the right amount of light and shade. And that's actually a kind of an interesting thing there too at the end, because that Ozzy video that I made, the one that got all the attention in the press. I actually said something like that in the video where I said that Ozzy was represented by these two flying animals, you know, the dove and the bat. And somehow he brought both of those types of energy into the world, you know, the kind of the dark and the light at the same time. And so just interesting to hear this same thing here, the right amount of light and shade. Anyway, I really like that comment. Okay. Oh yeah. And here's this is from Steve McLean, 5748 or 5787. This is an honorable mention comment because he kind of called me out on this one. This is actually from yesterday's Audio Mover AM. And it's, so he says, for God's sake, Robert, get the progressive prescription for your glasses so you don't have to constantly be adjusting them to read. It only takes a couple days to get used to them, but you will. I have 3 different prescriptions in each lens. Otherwise, I'd have at least 2 pair of glasses. Okay, duly noted. My son actually works for an eye doctor. And for some reason, I just don't. Anyway, I just have this one thing. And it's funny because I've watched myself back on a few of these videos, and I think that is kind of annoying how you're constantly doing that. And so, okay, I will sometime in the next month or two, I've got a lot happening, but I will get to an eye doctor and I will do something about upgrading my prescription and seeing about getting some progressive lenses so I'm not constantly adjusting my glasses. Thank you very much for calling me out and pointing that issue out, and I will get that resolved. So there you go. All right, finally, today's Daily Roomie. As you start to walk on the way appears. We would like to thank Digitech for their ongoing support of this channel. If you're a guitar player, visit digitech.com and check out all their latest cool stuff. Later today, we have a video coming out where I mansplain Van Halen to Shelley. You're not going to want to miss that. That's coming out in just a couple of hours. And if you're not following the channel, please follow the channel, like the video, share it with everybody you know. Please leave your comments down below. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.